It is a pleasure to be here again this week. Very excited to share with you additional information around disability, employment, and inclusion. Again, my name is Beth Butler-Fatal, and it is a pleasure to begin this presentation with you today. If we could go to the next slide. Thank you. So as a reminder, this presentation today comes to us as a part of the work we've done with the North Carolina Employment Collaborative. And this initiative was funded by the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities. And its primary purpose was really to create a opportunity to expand employment and inclusion to job seekers with disabilities, as outlined in our North Carolina State Unified Plan under the Workforce Innovations and Opportunities Act. And we are so excited to again launch the NCEC toolkit that we reviewed with you last week during our first session, as well as the video. All of that is available on our website at di-nc.org. I want to also take this opportunity to thank you all for responding to the survey that was sent out and will be sent out again following today's session. We take that feedback very seriously and understand from some of our participants that there were some issues with a couple of the links on the toolkit. So we have addressed that, and all should be working well. So again, we value your feedback and appreciate your time in filling out those surveys. At the end of today's session, again, you can expect another survey, and we welcome those comments. Let me take a moment as well that as we talk through today's session and the areas of focus, you're going to be hearing from not only myself as a presenter, but you'll hear from Pat Kuehl, as well as Barton Cutter. And so we are going to have an opportunity to really model a simple accommodation in today's presentation. We know that there are times when Barton's speech can be a challenge to understand. And so he has asked for both your patience and your transparency, and try to listen with your full attention. And if you miss something, Barton invites you to interrupt and ask him to repeat himself by using that chat box. So we can also text Barton as well, and you can do that directly through the chat box. So again, today is really an opportunity to put some of the work that we do into practice, and we hope that you will appreciate that experience as well. And if you'll go to the next slide. When we think about the work of the Employment Collaborative as well, it's important to remind you of the diversity that existed within the council that created this initiative. You'll see the various state departments listed, including Department of Commerce, Department of Health and Human Services, even the community college system, all as a demonstration of the collaborative efforts behind this work. I think it's important to also recognize the role that both business leaders and stakeholders with disabilities played in the work and the training that you're seeing today. Next slide. And so today's topic is the overview and statistics. This is going to give you, again, additional tools and resources that you can use as you build your inclusion strategies, as you grow that conversation within your NCWorks career centers or your workplaces around, again, the importance of disability inclusion. Next slide. So the goals for today's training will include, again, the overview of the statistics around disability employment. We're going to talk about the unemployment rate among people with disabilities and talk about some of the false information that's out there around disability employment and inclusion. Now, for those that are looking for strategies, I want to assure you that we will get to that. This is a series of webinars and training, so that information will be coming. But don't underestimate the value of data and the points that you will hear today. I do think that this is an opportunity for you to truly understand what it means to talk about this disability employment inclusion work, and the statistics you'll hear today should help to inform you of the return on that investment and the value that this work can have on your organization. You know, I always believe that you can't sell what you don't understand. And so today's session is really focused on helping you understand what it means to have a disability, the types of disabilities, and some of the statistics related to this work, so that you can then share that information with employers and other colleagues that can strengthen your confidence as you move forward in this work. Next slide, please. So let's start by talking about disability as it's defined. Many of you are aware that the Americans with Disabilities Act is really where we find that definition of a disability, a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. That's probably a term that you've heard in the past. This includes, again, those that have a record of such an impairment, or those that may be regarded as having an impairment. So there are different ways that one can qualify as a person with a disability. Next slide. And so when we think about what qualifies as a disability, again, this is a very short list, and you can find a number of other types of disabilities on the internet as you search for information around this. But these are key pieces to include, because when you think about a disability, many people don't think about an individual that perhaps has diabetes, or maybe a cancer survivor that has a disability. They think, well, it's an illness, yes, but does it qualify as a disability? And in many instances, the answer is yes. The other piece that so many of us are talking about now are mental health issues, and the impacts that mental health has had given the pandemic in the last couple of years. So mental health wellness is top of mind for many, and understanding that, again, anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, all of those qualify as a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Next slide. So when we think about major life activities, it's also important to understand what that means. And there are, again, a list of the types of major life activities. This is not an inclusive list, but it's certainly helpful for you to understand. Even individuals that may have attention deficit disorders or difficulty concentrating, sleeping, can rise to the level of a disability. So as we are thinking about those that are seeking to understand what qualifies as a disability, this is an important piece to understand. I think often that the one that comes to mind for me most often is even migraines. Migraines, although they can be common, they rise to the level, if they are debilitating for certain individuals, they can qualify as a person with a disability. Next slide, please. So statistically, it's interesting when you learn about the numbers here. 74% of those with disabilities have non-visible disabilities. And we'll see on a slide coming up that the population of Americans with disabilities is over 57 million Americans have a disability. But if you think about 74% of those that have disabilities have non-visible disabilities, I think it really does bring home the purpose and really the importance of why you are participating in today's training. If you think about the number of job seekers that you come in contact with on a day in and day out basis, helping them transition into employment, and you think about the statistic here, there is no doubt that there are job seekers coming to you with disabilities, many of whom may have non-visible disabilities. I think you couple that with, again, the virtual environment that we're all working in, engaging with someone, doing an intake through a virtual platform really does limit you in terms of even visibly seeing that whole person. So again, I really appreciate your attention to this training, and it really does highlight the importance of the work that we are doing together. I think often too, employers tend to, when they engage in this work, and many employers that may be coming to the career centers looking for talent may say, well, we don't really hire people with disabilities, or we don't really have people with disabilities working with our organization or our company. And when they see this statistic, they step back and realize that, wow, well, maybe I don't know what I think I know about my workforce. So really is an opportunity for you to help educate employers that are coming to you seeking diverse talent. Next slide, please. When we think about prevalence of disabilities, again, globally, 1 billion individuals with disabilities. That's 15% of our world's population. That's a significant number. As I said, here in the US alone, we have 57 million Americans with disabilities. This is interesting to understand the vastness of this population when we think that it surpasses the Hispanic, African American, and Asian American population in terms of the demographic and diversity, as well as the Gen X and the teens. So disabilities is a part of our culture. It's a part of our economy, and it's an important piece of information that that your partners need to know about. Next slide, please. So this is an interesting slide when we think about the labor force participation rate among individuals with disabilities. In 2020, 17.9% of persons with disabilities were participating. And they were of working age Americans. 17.9% were employed. If we compare that to those without disabilities, 61.8% were employed. Again, this is a demonstration of the population of individuals with disabilities that are sitting on the sidelines, right? How do we engage them? How do we get them back in the game to seek employment? And you at the career centers across our state play a key role in doing that. You offer your skills training, your upskills training, the different types of supports that you provide all need to be made available to job seekers with disabilities. And so it's through this initiative and through this work together that we really want to create a culture of inclusion right there where you are and impacting our communities. When we think about the data on both of these groups, you can't help but recognize the significant impact that COVID has had on the disability segment of the population. And that continues to prove true as research is showing that really the disability segment of our population has experienced incredible impact and really has been probably the most adversely impacted population within the COVID experience. And so with that, I'm going to now turn it over to Pat to continue on some additional statistics. Pat?
Thank you, Beth. So the poverty rate among people with disabilities, as you might imagine, if you're not working, you're twice as likely as a person with a disability to be living in poverty. 25.9% of people with disabilities are in fact living in poverty according to 2019 statistics. So it no doubt has gotten a lot worse in 2020 and 2021. That said, why does this matter? It matters because when people are on the margins, they're not contributing to the economy, and we find that we're missing out on the talent that those individuals could be bringing into the economy, especially at a time when we have such a need for people to come and participate because our unemployment rates are so low right now, and employers are coming to the NC Work Center saying, how can I find the talent I need to staff the organizations that I represent and the businesses that I represent? And many of you have had appeals from local businesses asking you how to tap into the population of people with disabilities, because some of these companies, many of them, have heard about this talent pipeline, and so they're eager to get in touch with folks with disabilities. Next slide, please. So this one is a very sad statistic, especially coming from my background as a lifelong educator. Simply getting a college degree does not assure you of a good transition into the employment workforce if you happen to have a disability. 75.5% of graduates who do not have a disability were employed after graduation, according to 2018 statistics from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. And only 28% of the graduates who had a disability and had earned a BA were employed in that same year following graduation. So what this says to us is simply getting a degree is not a ticket to ride, that more is needed to connect individuals with disabilities, even with degrees, to the employment workforce. And I think about the fact that it's also known that individuals with disabilities are less likely to participate in internships, apprenticeships, and work experience opportunities that their peer students might have participated in before they graduate. So I put this out there for the folks at NC Works. You folks see people on a daily basis, many of whom are going to be individuals who come in with professional degrees but lack the experience. So how important is it for you to connect them in ways that will get them launched on their first career? And now I have the privilege of turning over the next couple of slides to my partner in crime, Barton Cutter.
Hi. So let's talk a bit about barriers to employment. Now, while it is true that there are environmental barriers such as access in work environments or tools for technology or other accommodations. Can anyone tell us what the most pervasive barrier is? Lisa, this top barrier is the attitude both for people with disabilities and people without. So, what this means is that in your role as insurance professional, your perspective and attitudes around, around, around one's ability is vital, and you can help break down this attitudinal barrier in every conversation with every employer and every principal candidate that you meet. Back to you, Beth.
Thank you so much, Barton. And that is so, so true. The opportunity that you all have in the NC Works Career Centers to really impact attitude, simply by, again, your willingness to participate in these trainings and understanding and listening and learning, taking that back and really driving that attitudinal change through your interactions. So let's talk now about kind of some of the misinformation that surrounds this topic. When we think about reasonable accommodations, I know one thing you will hear often is that, well, I'm a small business, or accommodations are just too expensive and unpredictable. I mean, what if I hire someone and I have to accommodate them and the accommodation costs so much that it impacts my revenue. And the reality is 58% of accommodations cost nothing at all. And that's important to understand. And those that do cost something, again, studies have shown that they average only $500, and many of them less than that. I know that when I started employment, I've got a vision problem myself, and I came with the equipment I needed to be successful. So I had a CCTV at the time that I used, and that was provided to me through vocational rehabilitation, the Division of Services for the Blind, and they helped to support me with the tools that I needed to enter the workforce successfully. So that was part of my package. I used to laugh and say I come with some assembly required because that's what I needed. But again, I encourage you to really look at the numbers and the research before just dismissing the idea that accommodations can be far too expensive. They're simply not. You might hear that employees with disabilities are absent from work more often, or they're out sick more often, and that is simply not the case. There are studies that show that, in fact, even employers that hire people with disabilities find that coworkers are actually positively impacted and in fact, more inclined to come to work and more energized by the fact that the employer is willing to engage with the diverse population, including people with disabilities. And so morale is greatly impacted. And individuals with disabilities are a part of that. Studies also show that again, employees with disabilities are not absent any more than those without disabilities. And I think it's important to appreciate the fact too that there are some statements or information out there that might suggest that the impact would be negative to your company based on productivity or lack of efficiency if you hire a person with a disability. And what I challenge you to think differently when you think about that, because what I can tell you, and I say this as an attorney as well, you are never required to hire someone that cannot perform the essential functions of the job that you have for that individual, with or without an accommodation. And so to think that perhaps you need to lower your performance standards or your productivity. If we're talking about a distribution center, for example, that is absolutely not the case. In fact, I've worked for companies that had very significant productivity goals, and all of those goals had to be met regardless of whether you had a disability or not. Our role was to help to accommodate them to ensure that they could be successful. So that's where the conversation comes into play. But to think that you need to lower the standards of your operation is simply not the case. And next slide. So this is a fun slide here, because as we think about the qualifications of a person with a disability and meeting the minimum qualifications for positions that you might have or that employers you're working with might have, I want you to stop for a minute and take a look at the individuals that are pictured here on the slide in front of you. Any idea which of these individuals might qualify or have a disability? Yep, and I see some responses here, and some are saying all of them. And either you've seen this slide before, or you're just very, very, very wise. Because yes, every single person listed on this slide has some type of disability. And I would challenge anyone on today's call to suggest that any one of these individuals is less qualified or not qualified to perform the jobs or the careers that they enjoyed. And so if we look through this list, and again, I don't know if others are thinking, this is an amazing group of individuals, but I had no idea that perhaps Brett Michael, who is there in the center row on the first row with the hat on, he is a singer, and he's got diabetes, type 1 diabetes. Think about Jane Pauley, who is in the first line, second to the last picture there. Jane Pauley has bipolar disorder, so she has a mental health condition. Again, would anyone suggest that she's not qualified to perform the job that she has had, or the career that she's had? The other one I love, when you think about Dan Aykroyd, right? The black and white photo down there on the third row, fourth one in. Dan Aykroyd, of course, a very funny actor and comedian. He had Tourette's, and Asperger's syndrome as well. So again, amazing talent among the population of individuals with disabilities. And then finally, and I wasn't going to read all of these, but I'm certainly happy to do that if that is piquing those curious that may want to know, what disability one of these individuals may have. But James Earl Jones, who is pictured right under President Franklin Roosevelt there to the far right on the middle row, he has had a stuttering issue. So he stuttered, James Earl Jones. Now, some that may know, he is the voice. He has an incredible speaking voice, an orator and actor. So James Earl Jones stuttered. So when we think about, again, as Barton mentioned, the attitudes, right, that can so often keep us from hiring individuals or engaging with individuals with disabilities that are talented, that are ready to contribute to our organizations. This slide really says it all. Diversity exists, whether it's age, whether it's race, sexual orientation, it doesn't matter. Disabilities crosses all other lines of diversity and includes the talents of so many with disabilities. So with that, let's go to the next slide. And we were are going to, I'm going to turn it back over to Colette, and we're going to open it up for today's discussion questions. So Colette?
Thank you, Beth. All right, I am going to start putting the questions into the chat box here. And our first question is going to be, how did your understanding of what it means to be a person with disabilities change due to this presentation? I've entered in that chat box and encourage everyone to go ahead and respond. I will bring that to our presenters' attention so we can have some interaction and discussion at this point. All right, let's see. I'm going to just start and share some as things are coming in, so feel free to continue putting your comments in the chat box. Someone entered, we will try our best to just act normally. Someone else chimed in, I'm more aware of the pervasiveness of disabilities. And I'll give one more comment and throw it back. I had never thought of conditions such as diabetes as a disability.
Yeah. Yes, and that is not an uncommon learning as well. I think so often, due to medications and honestly due to individuals that have just had a condition, maybe since they were young, you've managed it, and it's not a impact to your employment or in some instances to your lifestyle. But when you read the definition and you recognize that, yes, absent the support that I need or watching my diet, it is a condition that can rise to the level of a disability. And so as employers continue to want to engage employees in conversation around disclosure, and we'll talk more about that in future webinars, but this is a key piece of that education process, is that many don't realize that their conditions qualify them as a member of the club, quite frankly. And so it's important for us to have these opportunities to share this.
Perfect. Would you like a few more comments, or would you like me to move on to question 2?
Let's go ahead and move to question 2, unless you see a comment that you'd like to share.
I just think, some comments about people didn't realize how many people, disabled people, live in poverty, and the statistics are staggering. So yes. With that, let me move on to the next question. And I just put that into the chat box. How did the facts presented here influence your attitude towards people with disabilities and employment? We'll give everyone just a moment to start adding that to the chat box. And it does take a minute, so I will just encourage, if anybody, were there any things that influenced your attitude today? Any changes that you wanted to share with the group? One comment came in, this is a good reminder to stay open and not let biases get in the way. Someone else chimed in, it has certainly broadened their perspective. And let me add one more now. More are aware of those who may not have visual disabilities. It's just helping everyone with their employment needs.
Absolutely. And that raises such a good point, because I think so often, and we find this as well in with employers all the time, that they're afraid to say something wrong, so they don't say anything, right? So they stay silent. And I think it's important through this training is that as you build your confidence, it's working this conversation into the everyday, right? So just like you do with an intake of any individual job seeker, finding a way to ensure that they know that accommodations or supports are available. So in the event that you have a family member with a disability, or you yourself may have a disability, we have supports and services available to you, similar to what we've shared in that video. And so the video we reviewed last session. So again, using these tools in a way that makes sense to you, make it your own, right? Make your comments and your conversations with job seekers uniquely part of your process.
And Beth, if I might add, if we can be aware that with hidden disabilities, what also comes is the unawareness of asking for accommodations. If people can become more comfortable asking for accommodations, and we're more understanding of the fact that even health conditions we didn't think before, like diabetes or cancer or whatever, I have a feeling that a lot of people would not leave the workforce if they felt more comfortable asking for accommodations in order to be able to stay in the workforce.
That's a great point.
All right, thank you. And actually, if I can actually ask this question, it came in a little bit earlier, but the timing is good for me to ask it. Someone was asking just that. I know you said fostering the discussion of someone being open to asking for accommodations. Are there best ways or recommendations on how to ask a participant coming in just to help them share any disabilities or anything that they might have, just to foster that discussion? Do you have recommendations or things to or to not ask?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I think one of the things to understand is that it could be as simple as the application process, right? And the intake, and what that looks like for an individual. So again, on an application or as someone enters the Career Center, ensuring that if there is a kiosk that has large print software available to them, having that knowledge on the front end can set the tone for just making it part of your welcoming, right? We support diverse populations here at the Career Center. Please understand we have opportunities and supports for individuals with disabilities as well. So again, if you know of someone or you have a family member that could utilize our services, we want to be sure that we are highlighting those as well. So again, being as natural as one can be, but I think that's the best rule is really just making it part of your promotion of diversity and inclusion within your Career Center. Pat, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, we have an entire session that's going to be devoted on the strategies for encouraging disclosure, and in setting the stage for that. The first step is simply to acknowledge that about 1 in 5 of the individuals you meet with at your NC Career Centers are coming to you with a disability, even if they are not ready or have decided that they want to disclose. That said, simply saying to everyone, by the way, we have accommodations. We have opportunities to provide you with other resources, just in case you or someone else you know might need those. And that's kind of like setting the table. But in a couple of sessions to come, we're going to drill down very specifically on those topics.
All right. Thank you, Pat. And that's a great segue into question number 3. How can you apply this knowledge to your role working within NC Works or in partnership with NC Works Career Center staff? I have just entered that into the chat box, so if you will go ahead and share your responses, we'll take just a moment to let everyone have a chance to do that. And I will piggyback while we're waiting for some of those comments to come in. We did have an attendee said, when I worked frontline, I would say to everyone, the more you share about yourself, the better we can assist you. And so the more open you are, the more doors that we can open for you. So just having that honest conversation, open the dialogue.
Absolutely. That's a great way to implement that.
All right. So let me see. I have one comment so far in response to question number 3. This person brought that knowledge with them and helped a lot of people who have had disabilities since being employed with the state in the last 10 years. Person's happy to report that they could share and put people at ease and give them confidence in finding a career or employment.
That's fantastic. That sounds like there's a staff member at the career center itself that has a disability, if that's what I'm reading. And so that is a great way. Again, I think my hope is that as we grow this conversation and these trainings, that this is going to help too your staff there at the career centers feel safer to self-disclose that they have a disability as well. And wow, right? How awesome would that be to begin to transform your own culture to be more inclusive and to open up those conversations? Because as you said, a person with a disability then can help guide and inform. And that's really what we see in so many employers as well through the business resource groups or employee resource groups, specifically for individuals with disabilities, is that the business then benefits from the knowledge and experiences of those individuals. And when we talk about attitude change, right, that's what drives that attitude in so many instances too, is that attitude that comes from having had a loved one with a disability, and or transforming a culture through shifting their expectations around what a disability is, right? And attitude is such a key part in that.
All right, fantastic. Are you ready for me to move on to question 4?
Yes.
All right, perfect. I'm going to put that question in the chat box. So on everyone that's attending today, how can you apply this knowledge to your role working with all job seekers? We would love to hear from you, so please go ahead and enter that in the chat box. Right, and we'll just wait another minute to give everyone a chance to put something in there. While we're waiting, let me actually backtrack and, we just got a comment in. Just treat everyone as an individual and meet them where they are, disability or not. Let's see, that's another one. Meet all job seekers. Well, here we are, where they are, and elevate them to where they want to be. Be open and honest. Another comment, being open-minded to each and every person who enters the career center. And let me add one more. I think it's important in my role to let the person with a disability know that they are in a safe place for sharing the information and that they will not be judged with any information that they share. The more they can share, the better we can understand and assist.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do think that it's okay to share with job seekers as well, as you represent employers that come to you seeking talent, that employers are looking for diverse talent, and that talent includes diverse talent of people with disabilities as well, right? So there are employers that are seeking to tap into this talent pool, and so it can definitely enhance their opportunities for finding employment. So understanding that and then not being afraid as well to engage in that conversation of, gosh, what if, we get stuck on, well, what if I present this job seeker, but I'm not sure they're going to be able to perform the functions of this job. Well, that individual has some history, or may have some history. Look at them just as you would any other job seeker in terms of how to support them and connect them to employment opportunities. And again, I think looking at their experience and understanding that their success has come from what they have done previously, whether it is the type of accommodation that they've had, or they may be a new person with a disability as well. So making those adjustments and creating again a relationship where you can have those open and honest conversations so that you can connect them to the resources that can lead them to their next employment opportunity and successful career.
Perfect. All right. And I'll just follow up. There's one other comment that came in that I want to share, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Beth. Someone entered, critically examine all the steps of the employment process to ensure that we're making the process accessible.
Yeah, that's a great call out. And I do think that that is the type of work that I hope that these trainings begin to ignite, is that you go back to your career centers and say, okay, guys, what is this teaching us about our own processes, right? And how can we become more prepared and just better inform our team around how we deliver our services and supports to those job seekers with disabilities that come through our door. And I know there's some great things happening. And so it is an opportunity to share those best practices and again, inform your other staff members on what's available should they need that.
All right. Well, that wraps up the chat box. So I will turn it back over to you, Beth, and to your team to wrap up today's session.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Colette. And again, on behalf of DisabilityIn North Carolina and the work of the North Carolina Employment Collaborative, thanks so much for joining us.